Welcome back to episode 7 of the 3 and Out podcast, your weekly renditions for all things National Football League and coverage around the league. Brett Schaubs alongside, as always, Mike Cicchetti and Ben Pope. A lot of things happened this past week in football, a lot of injuries, especially. So there were some different narratives and storylines in week 4. But let's begin, guys, with probably one of the biggest in what happened in the Ravens and Bills game. Obviously, Buffalo took that game on a game-winning field goal by Bass. But the biggest thing that came out of that game was the decision by John Harbaugh to go for it on 4th and goal to potentially put the Ravens in a position to win the game. Obviously, didn't happen. Bills were able to come around and take the win. But just wanted to gauge your guys' thoughts. What's sort of our initial reaction to Harbaugh's call here on 4th and goal, and was it a good one?
You want to take that, Benny?
Oh, yeah. So just to give context, it was about like 4.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and everything. They had been going for it on the first 3 downs on the goal line, still at like the 6-7 yard line, going to goal. And we've seen the Ravens do this type of thing before. We've seen them do it in the same exact situation against Pittsburgh last year where they went for it. It was in a 2-point conversion situation where tying the game, they could have just done it with a kick from Justin Tucker, but they went for the lead with the 2-point conversion with Lamar and the offense. And this is a little bit of a different situation, but still same type of narrative. So they are tied at 20 with the Bills. A touchdown obviously puts them up by a full score. They would only go up by 3 with a field goal from Tucker going with the field goal at 4th and goal. I honestly agree with the decision made by John Harbaugh. I honestly think that with the time left in the game and just with what's going on with timeouts, what time regarded for both sides, the Bills and the Ravens, I think the Bills would have gotten a really good chance to just march down to the opposing end zone and honestly have a really good shot of putting up a score regardless. So I think Harbaugh trusts in his offense to be able to give him a good opportunity to obviously score that touchdown. But I think if they went up by 3, the mindset there for Harbaugh was the Bills will be able to match that, if not almost guaranteed to score a touchdown in the 4.5 minutes that they had. So I think it's really aggressive. I think it shows the type of mentality that the Ravens and John Harbaugh are going to possess this entire game. And especially with Baltimore, who went up very quickly, scored 20 points on the Bills, 20-3, going into nearly halftime there. And they were held pretty much scoreless the rest of the second half, if not the entire second half. I think they just wanted to be aggressive in a point where they didn't think they were going to be able to get the ball back, even with the time allotted to the clock. I honestly respect it, and I think I get where Harbaugh is coming from, and I agree with the decision that he made. He's one of the best head coaches in the league. You got to kind of trust in his decision making. And yeah, I think the Ravens did make up the probably wrong decision in the long run, but I agree with the move that Harbaugh made.
I disagree with Harbaugh's decisions, and not because of the team. I understand why they did it. I understand the scenario and the quarterback you have, right? I'm just not a fan. I would rather take the guaranteed points, especially when you have a guy like Justin Tucker. It doesn't really matter in the long run because Buffalo, they march right down the field, like you mentioned, Ben, and would have been able to score a touchdown pretty easily against that Baltimore defense. Baltimore's defense has been like shockingly bad statistically. I think they're ranked 29th or 30th right now in the league through 4 weeks, which is not good because we know Baltimore, we know the guys they have on that defense, and we know how Baltimore is always, top 5, top 10 for the past few years. So see if they can get back. They've blown 2 huge leads in the second half and fourth quarter. And with, smarter defensive play and just being more safe on defense, they could easily be undefeated right now. But they're 2-2. And yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see if this is kind of like a narrative for them as they move forward. But for their sake and for our sake, they better hope not. But you never know. You never know.
I mean, if you look at this decision as a whole, I think this was more so trying to create a statement in terms of attitude than anything else. Let's go back to week one with a similar situation. It was Brian Dable and the Giants trying to get a week one win against the Titans, and they could either take the extra point and tie the game going into overtime, or you go for the 2-point conversion and win it. What do? They go for the 2 points, they win the ball game. Very similar sort of idea here with Harbaugh. If you go for the field goal, yes, you do take the lead, but it's of a lesser nature. I think by going for that full score, you're sort of trying to set a regiment or a statement here against a team like Buffalo, who is one of the top contenders in the conference. So I can understand where he's coming from. Personally, I would have taken the 3 points, but at the end of the day, it was a good ball game nonetheless. But
And it makes sense why they did it because, I
Yeah.
mean, Baltimore is known to do this. They're so dynamic offensively, but they, couldn't fool the Bills defense on that one.
yeah, definitely something to keep an eye out as we move forward into the season. But moving forward, let's talk about the team that they're actually facing this upcoming week in the NFL. The Cincinnati Bengals, one of their division rivals, actually had a nice week 4 win against the Miami Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. It was right after we recorded episode 6 here on the 3 and Out podcast. And it was sort of a game where the Bengals just were able to cruise through all 4 quarters. Obviously, Dolphins struggled a little bit with the injury to Tua Tagovailoa. Couldn't get a lot of offense going to support the defense. And it just seemed like it was Cincinnati's game with Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. So with that in mind, now the Bengals are 2-2. They fought back from back-to-back losses. How much are we buying back into the Bengals stock through 4 full weeks of the season?
We're buying back. I mean, I never really thought Cincinnati was, falling off, although they did start 0-2 that first week. I think it was kind of Pittsburgh's defense was just outrageous, insane that game. And the week 2 win, or the week 2 loss, I mean, over Dallas was, is what it is. But I think they're back into the swing of things. The offensive line the past 2 weeks has kind of, been coming into form for Joe Burrow.
For me, I never really bought into the Bengals kind of falling off, so I guess I'm still very much bought in. Their defense has been really outstanding to me. It's probably been the thing I've been most impressed with them for 4 weeks, allowing the second least amount of touchdowns behind Dallas with 5 touchdowns allowed on defense. They have been really phenomenal on both sides of the ball, led up by Trey Hendrickson, Jesse Bates, and them boys. They have been really good. And then Joe Burrow going back to even the week 2 game against Dallas, where he struggled a little bit in the first half to get it going. He's at 107 passer rating in those past 3 games. So he hasn't been turning the ball over as well, hasn't turned the ball over since week 1 against Pittsburgh. So that's good to see. He's been maintaining ball control. They haven't been giving it up on offense, especially with the struggles that we have seen from the Ravens on the defensive side of things. I'm interested to see what they're able to do in the head-to-head matchup coming up. But I am really confident in the Bengals still. They're kind of moving up my season-long rankings. But, yeah, I still have them as one of the favorites, not only in the AFC North, but just in the AFC in general. It's hard not to believe in Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume that a lot of the speculation from the Bengals is practically over by now. I think they've sort of found their stride, and it took a few weeks to realize that. But Cincinnati, so far through the last 2 weeks, has looked solid. Taking down Miami like that was a big need as far as confidence. So we'll see what they're like going up against Baltimore in week 5. With that, we move forward into our next topic. We jump ship to the NFC. And we're going to be talking a little bit about 2 teams that have sort of been, for the lack of a better term, disappointing through the last 4 or so weeks here in the NFL. We've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the LA Rams. Now, both of these squads are coming off of losses where they sort of didn't have a lot of offense going. Defense couldn't hold their own. Obviously, San Francisco beating the Rams on Sunday or Monday Night Football, and the Buccaneers losing to Green Bay in Tampa Bay. So 2 tough losses for either side. And now we're starting to get a more of a narrative of, are these teams like they were last year legit NFC contenders, or are they more concerning? But just to focus on our own topic here, which one of the two is more concerning? We'll start with Ben here. Is it Tampa Bay or is it Los Angeles?
Oh, it's 100% the Rams. They have looked, for lack of a better term, garbage. Honestly, the whole season. Even in their 2 wins against Arizona and Atlanta, they could have lost. They almost did lose to Atlanta. It came down to some of the final plays and Mariota throwing a interception at the end of the game. But yeah, it has not been an easy road for the Rams. At least with the Bucs, I know that in the 2 years that they've had with Tom Brady, they have been somewhat notorious slow starters. They're also working with a new head coach in Todd Bowles. Yes, I know he's been around the system for a few years, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Also, this is a return game for Mike Evans, for Chris Godwin, for Julio Jones, all the receivers that haven't been playing in the last couple weeks. So I'm going to give them a pass there. Also, they did fall behind against Kansas City pretty quickly, but it's not like Tom Brady didn't put up his own numbers on the offensive side of things. The defense has been balling out. They get a hall pass for this week against Kansas City. It just seems like the Chiefs kind of outplayed them even before the first snap, just in game planning. But yeah, that's against one of the best teams, if not the best team in football right now, the Chiefs. Whereas the Rams, they're playing against a Niners team, which Jimmy Garoppolo is getting his second full start since he's been handed the reins after Trey Lance's injury. And they looked awful on offense. They weren't able to do anything aside from getting the ball to Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee. No one else was able to do anything on offense. And it just seems like even though the defense did hold up a decent amount, they weren't able to stop Deebo Samuel. He had that big 50-yard touchdown that honestly was super impressive. Had like 7 or 8 blockers on that, which shout out to and awesome play call and awesome design there as well. But yeah, just the Rams have not looked good. I barely heard, watching the Rams game, any mention of what Aaron Donald or Bobby Wagner are doing, because they really haven't done too much. That really has stood out. Neither is Jalen Ramsey. He got cooked week 1 against Stephon Diggs and then has been kind of mad these past couple weeks against Drake London, Marquise Brown. Good receivers, but not anyone that you should really be letting too much up to. Yeah, it's definitely been the Rams. I believe way more in the Bucs, and I'm genuinely concerned about the Rams after we talked about them last week as being kind of the odds-on favorite in the division. I might have to transition that to San Francisco now, to be honest.
Mike?
Yeah, 100% agree with Ben. It's the Rams. I knew the Rams would regress, and I wouldn't really call it, Super Bowl hangover. It's just the fact that they lost a lot of key pieces on both sides of the ball, offensively, defensively. Von Miller was huge for them, especially in the playoffs last year. He's gone. You have Darius Williams, the cornerbacks to Jalen Ramsey, who I always mentioned. He's gone, and the offensive line, they lost a lot of pieces in Matt Stafford, and that shows because Stafford's the second most sacked quarterback in the league right now. I mean, they just look dull, like Ben mentioned, even in the wins, even in their 2 wins, and I don't even know, like they have the talent, they have a Super Bowl caliber roster, but they just can't seem to, get much going. Allen Robinson, pray for that man to, get some targets, get some stats on him for this year, but I don't know. It's been a rough 4 weeks for the Rams, and somehow they're 2-2.
I quite frankly do not understand how they're 2-2. They could have been 0-4 up to this point, considering the performances they've had in the last few weeks. It's a clean sweep. I'm also very much concerned about the Los Angeles Rams, straight up for what just Mike mentioned right there. Just the lack of pieces and the lack of depth on offense. I mean, I don't think I can recall hearing Ben Skoranic's name up until the Super Bowl halfway through the game of last year because Odell Beckham Jr. got hurt. Now we're hearing Skoranek more and more as he's working kind of his way through this offense, but he was sort of a really big depth piece last year in Los Angeles. Now has to step up. You're hearing other names stepping up to the picture to fill in for the guys that are getting tired. Your Aaron Donalds, your Leonard Floyds, your Bobby Wagners. You can't stay out there every single down of the game. So I think the lack of depth and the lack of ability to stay consistent has been the Rams' biggest problem. And I think it's going to haunt them going forward as they move through the season. I'm honest with Ben. I think I have to give the division right now to San Francisco just because of that nature and because Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers offense is able to play consistent football and they can back it up on defense. So I think with that, we can move on. Now we're all agreed. And we transition to the next division in the NFC. And that's the NFC North, right? A little bit of an opposite scenario we're going to be talking about here between the Rams and the Bucs. Excuse me. And that is the Vikings and the Packers. We have had a ton of discussions here on the pod about who is better, Minnesota or Green Bay, considering the amount of hype each of these two teams have had in the past, not just this offseason, but off seasons prior. So we've kind of gotten a little bit more of a picture as to what these teams are about through the first 4 weeks. The Vikings have quieted down a little bit. Green Bay's starting to ramp up. With this in mind, who do we have as our division favorite through 4 weeks? Is it the Vikings and the newly crowned offense, or is it still the Green Bay Packers?
Still the Vikings. Still the Vikings. And I'm going with this on my take of them going 13-4. Still staying strong with that. But honestly, I see both of these teams being like very, very on the same tier because they both have had their, shining moments and they both looked, a little weak points like Green Bay against New England. No one would have ever expected that game to go to overtime, but it did. And Minnesota, even they snuck it out against the Saints, who are now 1-3. Yikes, she's. But same tier of team. But I just trust offensively the Vikings more than I do the Packers. But shout out Romeo Doubs though; he's going to be a dog.
Ben?
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with Mike. I think it is the Vikings for me, even though they have had a couple ugly-ish wins kind of down to the last play against both the Lions and the Saints, two scrappy teams. Mike, I know you're disappointed with the Saints, but still, Minnesota has looked pretty solid on both sides of the ball. I think they are disappointing me a little bit on defense, but their offense has been pretty much what I've expected, maybe off to a little bit slow start, but they've still been very explosive both on the ground and through the air with Jefferson, Thielen, KJ Osborne, and more. Just Green Bay, I think their week 4 game kind of says it all to me, whereas Rodgers kind of looked like, I don't want to say lost, but like he just looked like he couldn't give a you-know-what against this Patriots team that was starting a third-string quarterback in Bailey Zappi, and they ended up going to overtime. Yeah, the Green Bay Packers, who won like 13, 14 games last season, would never have done that. I can tell you that right now. Whether you still want to blame it on Devontae Adams after 4 weeks, you shouldn't be, but you can do that if you want to, I guess. Alan Lazard and Romeo Doubs both had very solid games. Their run game has been solid, but they still have been kind of hesitant to make Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon those two top playmakers in their offense. They're still kind of getting limited just because they are running backs and not full receivers or anything. And then the defense hasn't looked as great the last couple weeks. As I initially kind of hope for them. I don't know. It's more uncertainty about Green Bay than I do about Minnesota. These both teams honestly have disappointed a little bit to my expectations. I don't know what you think, Mike.
Agreed.
But at least through these first 4 weeks, I'd give it to Minnesota, but I think it's a slight nod just because I think both teams could honestly perform better as the season goes on.
Yeah, they both have a lot to work on for sure.
I think there's a lot of growing pains on both sides, obviously. With Minnesota, I mean, I think that it's safe to say that Justin Jefferson has certainly not seen the workload as we all anticipated through the first 4 weeks, along with several other factors in the offense, including Dalvin Cook. Defense has also given up a fair share of points to the, as we mentioned, Lions and Saints. And then the Packers, straight up as Ben mentioned, the Packers from last year would not have let Bailey Zappi go to overtime with them and potentially put up a fight to win the football game. So I think it straight up comes down to who's going to be giving it 110% through all the rest of the season. And I think at this point, you're going to have to go with the Vikings. I think in some aspects, you can sort of see potentially a disinterest in Aaron Rodgers, or maybe not as much of a drive as we saw in him last year. But I think at this point, you have to give it to the Vikings and their upside. And it's going to be an interesting scenario as this plays out. But I think it's also safe to say, like we mentioned as well, both of them have disappointed, and there's a lot more left to be seen. All right. So we have covered through this point in the 3 Now podcast. Once again, thanks for joining. Brett Shops, Ben Pope, Mike Cicchetti. We have covered the Packers and Vikings, Bucks and Rams. We've covered the Bengals. How much can we buy back into their stock? We've covered the John Harbaugh situation to go forward on 4th and goal. And with that, we move forward to our second to last of our big topics here, and that's previewing this Thursday's game, Thursday Night Football. It's the Colts and the Broncos in Indianapolis, as far as I'm concerned. Indianapolis and Denver have both disappointed by many means this season, and I think that's safe to say on all aspects. Everybody thought Indianapolis, was going to be a much better football team with Matt Ryan under center and some changes to, sort of the scheme that they were providing. Hasn't really been the case. They've disappointed a little bit. They've been without Shaq Leonard, who's been dealing with a number of injuries, including now a broken nose, as it was just reported today. And then the Broncos on the other side, a lot of growing pains in the coaching staff. Offensive play calling has definitely been lackluster through the first 4 weeks. Defense has held their own. But now we present both of them in a situation where they're looking for a big win to sort of restate their quote-unquote dominance or confidence level this season. So if we look at both sides, all of their aspects, who is in need of this win more, Indianapolis or Denver? We'll start with Mike on this one.
I can't really give you a good answer because I think they both need this win. I mean, I guess I would lean.
It's a tough one.
It is. It really is, because it's both need. I guess I would lean the Colts. And I say that because they've just looked,
abysmal.
Right. Whereas Denver has kind of shown hope, although, very, very disappointing start to the year. They've shown hope. Russ wasn't hot dog and milk in week 4, even though they lost to the Raiders. But the Colts have just had nothing going for them. I know they beat the Chiefs, but that was off of a few missed kicks. And that could have went the Chiefs' way as well. But I don't even really want to get too deep into it because I feel like Ben would have a much better, talking point for this one. So I guess I'd go with the Colts.
Ben?
Yeah, I'm pretty close on this as well. I think that one thing that is kind of coming into play for me is the injury concerns about both teams' running backs. So Javonte Williams for the Denver Broncos is going to be out for the rest of the season with an ACL tear. I know that's very close to both Mike and Brett's heart, so we'll give a quick rip in the chat there. Whereas Jonathan Taylor, as of our recording here on Tuesday night, has not practiced, and this is prior to a Thursday night game. He was currently in a walking boot last time we was seen. But he talked to reporters on Tuesday and said that he was still planning to play in the game on Thursday. The feasibility of that, I don't know, to be honest with you. I think that the severity of the injury itself, it's a low ankle sprain. I honestly think that he can be able to play if he's able to play at least limited on Wednesday. The possibility of that yet to be seen. With all that in mind, though, I'm actually going to give this to the Broncos, and I think I'm going to give it to the Broncos just because of the nature, once again, of their division. Just looking at where they're coming from, the Colts, 1-2-1. The only real competition I see in their division is going to be Jacksonville. Tennessee has kind of been, they've produced a 2-2 record so far. They've beaten Indianapolis this past week, but also they looked awful in every second half of football that they played this season. So I'm not too confident there. They've really been carrying the load in second halves to these victories. But with the only competition really being Jacksonville for the Colts, and they're coming off a game where Lawrence, I know it's a ranked game, but giving up 4 fumbles as a quarterback, you can't be seeing that, dude, especially when he's been getting phenomenal protection all season. They've been dealing with injuries, the Colts have, with Shaq Leonard now being out with concussion. He's missed 3 out of the 4 games that they played. I think you can rub off some of the Colts' necessities just to lack of health and honestly just some question marks that I have about their team. But Denver, it's honestly just been figuring out the head coach and the quarterback situation. That's been their whole issue, and they really haven't shown much. I guess their best game thus far has been this past week against a Raiders defense that has been playing less than mediocre, to be honest with you, and they still weren't able to pull out a victory. So, yeah, even after the defensive coordinator got a stand of the week last week, I guess they can't show up against Derek Carr and Josh Jacobs. So, yeah, I think just with the severity of the division and everything that's going on with both teams on the injury side of things, I think Denver needs to win more and is more in need of a victory this Thursday night.
Yeah, just a preface on that as well. Going into the game against Vegas, Denver was top 3 in rushing yards allowed in a game so far this season at 81. Through 3 quarters of football against Vegas, they allowed 167 to Josh Jacobs and company. I think just in the nature of this, I think Denver needs the win more just to sort of assert themselves as a strong team in the AFC West. I think you're very much seeing the Chargers and the Chiefs running away with who's going to win it. And it's going to be between, the Broncos and the Raiders to decide who gets that 3rd place spot. And as of now, it's Denver, but obviously when you lose against the Raiders, that's not a good sign. So I think they need this win as far as confidence goes, and to show that they're still confident and can figure things out. I think Indianapolis also wins it in the sense that they need to get their stuff together, and they need to get it together fast because Jacksonville is coming together quickly. They look like a pretty strong football team, and they look like somebody who could win this division if Indianapolis can't get it together. So should be an interesting game. I think it'll be chippy, and as far as like a little bit of a gritty goes on Thursday night. But again, who knows what could happen between both sides. So that has our bases covered. Before we jump into our 2-minute drill here in the 3 and Out podcast, last question, right? We've been through 4 weeks of football. A lot of stuff has happened. We've had some expectations that have been met, not met, exceeded. When we look at the best teams in football and why they're there, a lot of the cases, it's the coach, the coaching staff, how they get to that point. If we look through 4 weeks of football right now, each of you guys, who is your coach of the year favorite through 4 weeks of football as of right now?
Yeah, I'm going to beat a really dead horse here, but I'm going to be going with Mike McDaniel, the coach of the Miami Dolphins. I think that he has had the most impressive wins of any coach through the first 4 weeks, whether it's the comeback victory against the Baltimore Ravens, the also come from behind victory against the Buffalo Bills, and even putting up a hard-fought game against the Bengals last week with I don't want to say underprepared, but a backup quarterback coming in after a significant injury to their franchise quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. McDaniels looked phenomenal among not only the first-year coaches, but the coaches that he's been able to go up against, which is Zach Taylor, who went to the Super Bowl last year. You got John Harbaugh. You got Bill Belichick. You got Sean McDermott. That's a pretty decent list to be facing off of and getting a 3-1 record out of that. The defenses look very solid, but the offense has been McDaniel's bread and butter, being able to use Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to the best degree to his strength. He's made this team look phenomenal and better than I even expected them to be coming out of the year. So Mike McDaniel is my coach of the year leader thus far through 4 weeks.
Mike?
For me, it's Nick Sirianni. Philly is the only undefeated team still in the league. They're one of 2 teams who are top 5 in offense and defense, Buffalo being the other team. Although they haven't played the greatest competition when you compare them to Miami, Mike McDaniel definitely has a strong case right now. But just the nature of how Nick Sirianni kind of was when he came into the job, nobody really expected him to be kind of a long-term coach. They all just thought he would have been like a bridge coach coming in for a bad team. To second year coaching, he has his team the only undefeated record. He has Jalen Hurts as a top 3 MVP candidate and top 5 offense and defense. I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
I'm honestly going with Mike here. I think it's going to be Nick Sirianni. Excuse me. There were small talks at the end of last year that Sirianni would be in the bidding just from bringing the Eagles to the playoffs when everybody thought they would be a bottom 5 team going into the year. And now he's got his team 4-0 moving forward into week 5 of the year. So I think you have to give a lot of credit to him and bringing this offense together so quickly in about a year and a half time span. So it's my pick for Sirianni, but I think Mike McDaniel is also a very strong pick should things change in the AFC and with the Dolphins.
Really quickly, I want to shout out 2 other guys that were on my radar along with Nick Sirianni, who I think is a very fine choice. 2 other guys from the NFC East, in Brian Daboll and Mike McCarthy. Both have brought their teams to 3-1 records when their quarterbacks are Cooper Rush and the fumbler Daniel Jones. No, their competition hasn't been as stout as either the Eagles or the Dolphins, but I think with Cooper Rush under center and the situation Dallas is going through, and with Daboll, who's another first-year head coach, Brett mentioned something about his week 1 victory and what he was able to do going for 2 points, kind of in a risky situation. They've both been able to put their teams in very strong situations to win and kind of overperforming to the degree that we thought they'd be at so far. So I just wanted to give a shout out to both those guys who I think are at least deserving the conversation for thus far in the season.
Yeah, I think
shout out Todd Bowles too. Love that man.
Todd Bowles has done a decent job through the first 4 weeks, especially with what he's had to work with. Brian Daboll.
No, he hasn't.
And even Doug Peterson. I didn't even think of him.
Shout out Dougie P. Yeah, shout out Dougie P.
Yeah, shout out Kevin Stefanski too.
What'd you say?
Shout out Kevin Stefanski too.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say through the first 4 weeks, there's no necessarily clear favorite. I think a lot of it's based on record and how successful they've been. But I think there's going to be a little bit more of a pot stir through the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, shout out Pete Carroll. And shout out Nathaniel Hackett for a worse coach through 4 weeks.
All right, settle down. Settle down.
You have your worst coach in Nathaniel Hackett. That's your first favorite team, but your third favorite team has Pete Carroll. You got to take the good with the bad, Brett.
Still
and shout out Mike Tomlin too. I love that Muggsy, but first losing record as head coach. It's going to be tough. That's Brett's second favorite team.
Yeah, I don't doubt it either. They're going to get a top 5 pick. Calling it right here. But that wraps up our main topics here in the 3 and Out podcast. We now move forward into the 2-minute drill hosted by Mr. Ben Pope. I'll let Ben take it away from here, but What do we got in this week's 2-minute drill?
Yeah, let me take control of this, Mosey. First of all, the Steelers going from playoff team to top 5 pick. What a turnaround there by Mr. Schaubs. But we have some things going on here. We're through a quarter of the season. I know it's 17 weeks, but it's kind of a quarter. So with some of the things that we thought at the beginning of the season, some of the things that we're thinking about now, I think it's time for some overreactions, week 5 overreactions. I'm going to be giving you each a statement, and maybe this is an overreaction, maybe it's not. You're just going to be telling me yes or no if this statement that I give you is an overreaction. I explained it too much. We're going to get right into it. Brett, you're going to be starting us off. This is our first overreaction statement. I feel like I know the direction on this one, but we'll give it out anyway. The Philadelphia Eagles, they have been phenomenal. Like mentioned, they are the only undefeated team left in the NFL. Brett, your statement is the Eagles are a lock to make the NFC Championship game. Is this an overreaction or not?
I think as of right now, it is an overreaction. I think it's really tough to tell who's making the NFC Championship just because of what's been going on in football right now and how quirky like this season's been with teams being disappointing, exceeding expectations. The Eagles have also played some really interesting opponents. You've had Jacksonville, take it or leave it on how you interpret that game. They've played the Commanders. It's been I want to say easy, but it's been a lighter road for Philadelphia. And yes, they are 4-0, the only team left undefeated in the league. I think it is an overreaction to say they're a lock for the NFC Championship.
Michael?
Huge overreaction. Huge overreaction. Philly has a weak schedule when you look at it this year. I think they're going to look really good record-wise. But once the playoff times come, I would trust the Bucs. I would trust the Vikings. I would trust the Packers, 49ers, how they end up. The Saints, I trust.
Oh, my. Here we go again.
No, I'm just joking. But there are just a lot of teams that I would trust in that I see as stronger than Philly in the NFC. I wouldn't be surprised if they did make the NFC because they're playing at such a high level. But I wouldn't say they're a lock. Overreaction. Slam the overreaction button.
No deal, Howie. Just to give a little bit of context here, if the Eagles were to be in the playoff seating, as it were right now, they would be playing the winner of Jimmy Garoppolo and the Niners and Daniel Jones and the Giants. So,
and this is why we don't look at the playoff picture 4 weeks in.
Hey man, just putting it out there.
Fair.
I'm
To
surprised.
put it into perspective, the Denver Broncos were 4-0 through 4 weeks last year, and look where they turned out.
Yeah, and we know they were garbage.
Yep.
So,
Speaking of which, actually, speaking of Howie, Brett, do I see Soul Patch Shadow?
No, sadly. It's coming back soon, though. Stay tuned.
well, let's pray for us here on the 3 and Out pod when the Soul Patch comes back. But moving on, we'll go into our next overreaction statement, quote unquote. Michael, I think at the beginning of the season, we were all very confident that it would be the AFC West that would be hosting 3 potential playoff teams, whether you want to say it's the Raiders, the Broncos, the Chiefs, or the Chargers. I think that time has turned to the opposite side of the West, aka the NFC West. All 4 teams are currently 2-2. Mike, is it an overreaction to say that 3 teams in the NFC West will make the playoffs?
Yeah, that's an overreaction. I can't trust Seattle. Shout out Geno Smith, though. He's been excellent for them.
He has been rising in MVP odds, just to throw it out there. He's like close to top 10, which is absurd. But go ahead.
He's been incredible. So shout out him. I can't trust them 4 weeks in. And I'm still sticking with my guns on Arizona not making the playoffs. I don't see them. But the Rams and the 49ers, I would say they're both playoff locks.
I think there's
Overreaction. My fault, Brett. Go ahead.
no. I couldn't tell you were talking. It lagged out. My bad. I honestly think there's a bigger chance potentially the NFC East has 3 playoff teams than the NFC West does.
You're
Total
lying.
pause.
You're lying.
Talk about a bold take.
You're lying.
Yeah, I'm lying.
This man said the Eagles wouldn't even make the conference game. They don't believe in the Giants and the Cowboys. Go ahead, Brett.
I don't think it's an overreaction. I think it's safe to say the Rams and the 49ers will both make the playoffs at this point. Which one is the wild card team? I don't know. And then you have the Cardinals, who are sort of wishy-washy. I don't know what to expect. I've always been low on.
Please, Michael. I'm sorry, Brett. Go ahead.
Don't be sorry. It's okay. Someone just had to be rude and interrupt. But the Cardinals are wishy-washy. I don't know what to expect. And like Mike mentioned, I don't trust Seattle, despite what they've been able to do through 4 weeks. I think there's definitely a chance. There's still a lot of football left to be played, but I don't think it's an overreaction to say that. It happened last year.
It did happen last year. Can it happen 2 years in a row? You forgot to mention Geno Smith and the Seahawks, your third favorite team. That's absurd, but we're moving on. We talked a little bit about the Colts, this being a must-win game, maybe, in Mike's opinion, this upcoming Thursday. But let's talk about the team that they were playing a couple weeks back in the Jacksonville Jaguars, the team that they are facing in that division in the AFC South, coming off an ugly rain game against the leading NFC team in the Eagles. But the Jacksonville Jaguars still do lead the AFC South currently. Brett, is it an overreaction to say that the Jaguars will win the AFC South?
No, not one bit. I fully believe they are going to win the AFC South. I don't like the Colts this year. I've said that before, and I'm a big fan of the way the Jaguars have been playing efficient football on both sides so far through 4 weeks. I think they continue that trend, especially with the weak schedule they have in the division right now. So it is not an overreaction. I think Jacksonville wins the division.
Mr. Chiquetti, your response?
That's an overreaction. We're 4 weeks into the season, and the Colts only win is a fluky win. But, growing pains, new Q, great offensive line, solid offensive weapons, and their best defensive player has been out 3 out of the 4 games. I think the Colts still have a chance. I think the Jags are a solid team, but I'm just not counting the Colts out because you know how now the young teams are. They can get outsmarted. Dougie's going to get outsmarted by Frank.
I think Frank Reich outsmarts himself sometimes.
You're not wrong. Well, that was really foul. But we'll move on. The Jaguars playing the Texans this week, looking for a bounce back against the draft man, Davis Mills. All right. How do I have... Okay, so this is unbelievable to say, but this is going to be 2 straight questions about the same team, and you're not going to like it when I mention them at first. The New York Giants currently have a 3-1 record, are the number 7 team in the NFC. They have made a unbelievable run with first-year head coach Brian Daboll. They had an injury to Daniel Jones, so they brought in Tyrod Taylor for a couple snaps. He got injured, then Daniel Jones came back. Hopefully he'll be back for this week, but their defense has been solid. But they are 3-1. Brian Daboll has done, honestly, a very solid job as the head coach of the Giants thus far. Michael, start this one with you. Overreaction or not, the Giants can make a legitimate run at the playoffs.
Not looking at their schedule, I would say not an overreaction.
Oh, give me the deeds.
Give me not an overreaction. Daniel Jones, in his 4th season, 5th season,
something like that.
Right. He's never had the offensive mind like Brian Daboll. They're 2-2, 3-1. What are they?
3-1.
3-1, right? Brian Daboll, they have one of the best young tackle duos in the league, despite Evan Neal. He had the growing pains in week 3. But Andrew Thomas has been playing out of his mind. Evan Neal on the right side, and defensively, I kind of like what they got going on with Kayvon Thibodeau and my guy Aziz. And Adoree Jackson's been pretty solid, if I can recall. In a weak NFC, I wouldn't rule them out. I think Daniel Jones definitely has the talent to do so. I think he's just very off and on. If you can get consistency out of him, Saquon's been the best back in the league, and I think that's what they need. He's been averaging, I think, close to 140 scrimmage yards per game. So shout out Saquon, shout out the Giants, going to the playoffs.
Don't be spoiling the next point here, Michael.
Big Blue, Big Blue.
Right, go ahead.
I think it's an overreaction personally. As much as I like the way the Giants have been playing football through 4 weeks and the efficiency, excuse me, that the Giants have been able to run the football offensively, the way they've been sort of able to treat Daniel Jones and sort of get his abilities out, I don't see this sort of maturing or lasting that much longer in the long haul this year. I think there's just too many teams and too many factors to consider in the NFC over the Giants when you look at it through 17 full weeks. So I'm going to say it is an overreaction to assume that the Giants will make the playoffs or at least make a run.
We will see. We will see. I took a look at Big Blue's schedule. They got Green Bay this week. We'll see how that goes. It kind of goes off the rails from there. So we'll kind of be interested to see how they develop in the coming weeks. But Mike, you stole my next point. I was going to talk about that running back in Big Blue, and that's Saquon Barkley. Mm-hmm. Saquon currently leading the league in rushing yards with over 460, about a 4 or 5 yard lead over Nick Chubb. Both have been phenomenal. But I want to talk about Saquon Barkley. We mentioned him a little bit briefly in our comeback player of the year standings there. We had mentioned Jameis and CMC were our main 2 picks, but Saquon was someone that Mike Chicane was thinking about, even though he picked famous Jameis. Pause on that. But Saquon, he's been phenomenal this year, coming off a 160-yard game against the Bears this past week. Brett, is it an overreaction to say that Saquon Barkley is once again the best running back in the NFL?
This is very difficult.
No, it's not. No, it is not.
I don't think it is. I don't think this is an overreaction right now. I think as of this moment in time, Saquon is the best running back statistically and talent-wise in the NFL. I don't think Jonathan Taylor has proven much through 4 weeks with the Indianapolis Colts. I think McCaffrey's in an underproven offense in Carolina. And I think Austin Eckler, despite his exceptional game last week against Houston, hasn't really done much for Los Angeles. So I think it's fair to say Saquon Barkley has taken that top running back spot as of right now. It could change in 3 weeks' time. It could change in a week's time. I don't know what could happen. But as of this moment in time, he is the best running back in football.
Not an overreaction whatsoever. He's been the most consistent back, and this has been a very weird year for running backs. Like you mentioned, those few backs that you named, also Derrick Henry, who has only had 100-yard rushing game this year. Nick Chubb, though. Nick Chubb, I think, is a close second. I don't know. Nick Chubb, I don't think just Saquon has a lot higher name value, and just because of his same and because he's coming back from a few bad injuries and just some down years. But I think Saquon, I mean, all you need to do is get him healthy, and you know what he does. So Saquon is easily the best back in the league right now.
Well, we like to hear it. And finally, we have one more point here for our overreactions, and this is kind of a fun one because this is a fun team. The Detroit Lions, coached by Dan Campbell, a little bit underwhelming. They had a monumental game against Geno Smith and the Seahawks, 48-45. Came down to some of the last snaps. It seemed like they were scoring on literally every drive. Are the Detroit Lions, despite their record, the most entertaining watch in the NFL? I'm going to turn over to Brett first.
No, I don't think so.
So
I think
overreaction. Yes.
Yes, it was an overreaction, to put it formally. I think the Miami Dolphins are the most entertaining football team to watch. With Waddle, Hill, Edmonds, and all those guys, I think it's just too dynamic to take out. But I do think the Lions are fun to watch with all of the pieces that are growing together. However, it is an overreaction to state they're the most entertaining so far.
Michael?
Yeah, that's an overreaction. I would even argue they're one of the least watchable teams thus far. That's a joke. That's a joke.
What?
That's a joke.
When did we switch over to Denver, dog?
Well, yeah, that's not a lie. And yep. No, I mean, you know who I am as a football fan, and I like defense. I don't get to see big stops when I'm watching the Detroit Lions. Offensively, they are fun. And I think Jameson Williams will add another element offensively for them. So I think Jared Goff, I don't think this is a fluke for him. I think he can keep this up throughout the season, especially with JMO coming back for them. See how that adds an element onto Amon-Ra and DJ Chark. But defensively, they don't do it for me. Miami's a good watch. Even Philly is fun on both sides. But Buffalo and the Chiefs, that's like, ooh, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Buffalo and the Chiefs. That's a good watch. That's a good watch. I like to, when I watch a football game, I like to see good quarterback play, great offensive line play, and that defensive stops. Kansas City and Buffalo really gets it going for me.
Well, we don't have any of those three with. I won't keep harping on it, but we'll move on.
That's
crazy. We are done
crazy.
here with the. Oh my God! I didn't even say the team. God, what a softie. We are going to be moving on here. Once again, thank you for watching the 2-minute drill. So we'll be switching back to our regularly scheduled program. Mr. Shots, if you're not crying behind your screen, take control once again.
I'm not crying. Thank you for asking. Just sobbing on the inside. But we move forward. It's time for our games of the week. In week 5. Definitely a less anticipated week, to say the least. A lot of interesting matchups around the league. But we'll kick it over to Mike to start this off. Mike, what's your game of the week?
Yeah, we already talked about this earlier, but my game of the week is the Thursday night game between the Colts and Broncos. They both have a lot to prove. I think they're going to come out both hard because they both know these are, must-win games for both of them. They've both been disappointing, and they both really need this win. So I think even though it's kind of like the battle of mid, that they're going to put on a good contest for us to watch. So shout out Thursday Night Football. It's unfortunate that it's on Amazon Prime because I hate that. But, NFL's got to get their bag, and they got it. So shout out Colts and Bronx. And shout out BC for being, such a big Broncos fan through these trying times.
It has definitely been trying times. Ben?
I feel like I'm one of the few people that likes the Amazon Prime games just because, like, maybe it's because the past couple years I'm just roped into automatically getting Prime for the year because it doesn't notify me when my time is up. So I just be like, okay, I'm stuck with Prime for the year.
Yeah.
Shout out Amazon for not notifying me. But we will go to my game of the week. It's the Battle of the Coopers, baby. Cooper Cup versus Cooper Rush. Well, my game of the week is Dallas versus Los Angeles, the Rams versus the Cowboys. And I think this is actually an interesting matchup because if you showed me this game week 2, I'd honestly be questioning why you even thought this was a game. But the way that Dallas has come out and played 3 straight victories now going into, I believe this is in Los Angeles. So it's going into SoFi Stadium to play the Rams, the defending Super Bowl champs who have not been playing like that. They are in desperate need of a victory to kind of right the ship, show that they are somewhat of the team that we expected them to be, the Super Bowl champs. But the Cowboys, man, I'm honestly trying to think of a reason why I shouldn't pick them in this game. Maybe just say the name Cooper Rush and that'll be enough. But they have been able to certify both a passing game and a run game around Rush enough to kind of keep the offense going. The defense has been putting up stop after stop and getting those turnovers that the Dallas offense needs. And that's exactly what Stafford's been doing on the other side of the ball, leads the league in interceptions right now. So it's honestly going to be an interesting matchup to see if the Rams and that offense are able to kind of right the ship against a stout Dallas defense. So I'm really interested to see this 4 o'clock game out of SoFi.
Yeah, the Battle of the Coopers will be something to watch. Thank you, Ben. Then we move to mine. It is the Bengals and Ravens, the Sunday night football matchup. This is probably one of, if not the biggest divisional matchups we're going to see in the AFC this year. Bengals and Ravens sort of duking it out to see who's the best in their division. Obviously, this is the first these two squads will meet this season. But if you look at both of them where they stand right now, still looking for a little bit more confidence than what they anticipated into the year. And both of them are looking to establish as one of the top teams potentially making a playoff run. Both present dynamic value in the Bengals and the Ravens, each offensive sides. Both defenses have had their highs and their lows as well. So I think this is going to be a very much even matchup and competitive play. They're both going to come out hard. So I am very much looking forward to see this Bengals and Ravens matchup. So just to recap, Bengals Ravens on my end. On Mike's end, it is the Broncos and Colts on Thursday Night Football. And then on Ben's end, the 4 o'clock afternoon matchup between the Rams and Cowboys in SoFi Stadium. And with that, it brings us to our last discussion of the evening, and that is our beloved Stan Sessions. For those of you who are new to the podcast, these are sort of our players where we go around the horn and sort of give our love to guys who performed extremely well or exceeded expectations in the previous week. So with that in mind, we will start it over to Ben, who looks like he is giddy and ready to go. Ben, who is your first Stan for week 5?
Yeah, I feel like saying that Titanic meme. It's been 84 years. It's been 3 years since I had faith in this player, unfortunately, but he might be back. Miles Sanders, baby. He's my first Stan of the week. Miles Sanders. I think everyone left him to the doghouses, man. Like, that first bad year that Carson Wentz had, well, I think it was Sanders' second year in the league. Dealt with injuries. He's dealt with injuries. He's never been consistent as a lead back. We've never seen Philly really treat him that way. And I loved his talent. His first year, he had some really like spotty moments of showing that he could be honestly a really good running back in the league. We haven't seen anything in the past 2-3 years from Miles Sanders, but then he comes out this weekend. First of all, he has looked very solid for the first 3 weeks, but then he comes out this weekend. Over 160 rushing yards, 27 attempts, elite usage for the running back here in a game that was kind of determined by the run, pretty bad weather, but still 2 touchdowns for Miles Sanders. Philly has improved their passing game and still been able to establish the run like any other team in the NFL. They've done a phenomenal job at that. Even though that Kenny Gainwell and I guess Trey Sermon now that Boston Scott's dealing with an injury have been getting a little bit of work, it's honestly been the Miles Sanders show. He's been phenomenal to start off the year. That's been an immaculate help to Jalen Hurts in the passing game. And dare I say it, Sanders might be getting another contract with the Eagles, which didn't seem like a possibility at the beginning of the year. So I'm ecstatic for this guy. It's been 3 years in the making. Miles Sanders is my first stand of the week.
Mike?
I got to go with my boy Z Willie. Zach Wilson is my first stand. Fourth quarter, turning it up for the Jets. The Jets in the longest time seem like they have life again. Defensively, Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed have allowed for the lowest or tied for the lowest receptions through the starting corners. They've been great. Quentin Williams is playing at an all-pro level, and offensively, they got the guy. They got their guy. Zach Wilson is that man, and I'm excited to see him progress throughout the year. Shout out to him. I'm just so proud. Shout out Z Willie.
10 for 11 with a touchdown in the fourth quarter. Never have I been so proud to see a white man do the gritty.
And also, we're putting so much stock into Elijah Moore now. His favorite target.
Bless up. Thank you.
Oh, man.
That
is a tough one. That's a tough one to match.
All right, now, Brett, now you can announce Rashad Penny is yours.
No. Oh, TJ Hawkinson stand.
I knew it.
That's good.
8 catches, 179 yards, 2 tutties for the big man.
That's good.
This was a situation where the Lions didn't have anybody to throw to this week besides Josh Reynolds.
Who?
Besides Josh Reynolds and Jamal Williams out of the backfield. So TJ Hawkinson got a ton of love from Jared
run back.
We have not seen TJ Hawkinson do any of this sort of stat line in a long time, practically ever since he came into the league out of Iowa. So I'm a TJ Hawkinson stan after this crazy performance.
Yeah, we're really pulling the names out of the same hat here. We're going with the same exact game, Saints and Lions. Oh, my God. I'm a Tariq Woolen stan. Whoa. So Tariq Woolen with the immaculate pick six on – never thought I'd say immaculate pick six when I'm mentioning Jared Goff, but it was a beauty of a pick six. Read that route completely well. If you check out the play just on the recap of the game, ended up being the game-saving play kind of for the Seahawks with the way that the game ended up being a 3-point contest. Tariq Woolen, in his first year in the NFL, his first interception, I believe, on the year, and pulling a pick six with it as well. That's a false statement. He had a pick against Atlanta last week, but 2 straight weeks now with a pick for Tariq Woolen. My second stand of the week. 2.
Yeah, he's been incredible. Straight 6'8" cornerback. But my second and final stand of week 4 is Hassan Riddick of the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly really went out and got Hassan Riddick. They got CJGJ. They got James Bradbury to really bulk up their defensive unit. And Hassan Riddick, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, both of those recovered. Top 3 defense in the league. Philly's here. I have a tough time with Philly though, because like my last year talking about how Jalen Hurts is overrated, I've come around on him. I like Jalen Hurts now. I don't know. They're just such a tough team to gauge because although they are undefeated, I don't know. I love you, Philly. And shout out G. And also, we haven't shouted out this man a little bit. Shout out JC as well. Shout out JC for his 49ers.
Hey, posted on Snapchat after the win. Big win for the 49ers. Shout out JC.
Just gonna give the man's business away like that, huh?
Well, he put it out to the public, so shout out JC.
Oh, to his friends. That's what Snapchat is, dog. My God. Let's move on to the stand, please, Brett.
Moving forward. My last stand, I'm a Denzel Perriman stan. Going into the Broncos-Raiders game on the Vegas side, Denzel Perriman was all over the field for Vegas. Josh McDaniels had him back in coverage, one-on-one situations. He had 5 total tackles, 4 solo, 2 for a loss. And this guy, we really got to gauge on what his value is to this Raiders team. I think he's one of the more valuable pieces when it comes to this defense and how they're going to perform along with Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. But I think this is going to be somebody to watch for going forward. I am a Denzel Perriman stan.
And that probably pains you to say.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but got to give credit where it's due.
Hey, at least you're showing love.
That's what I'm saying. We love Philly. We love Denzel Perriman. We love Z Willie.
We do love Z Willie. We love Z Willie.
And with that, we wrap up this episode of the 3 and Out podcast. As always, be sure to like and subscribe and check us out on YouTube at 3 and Out podcast, as well as checking us out on all of our podcast platforms, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, 3 and Out podcast. Signing off for now. Be sure to stay tuned in for next week. May have something special planned in the works, but this is Brett Schaubs with Ben Pope and Mike Cicchetti. Take care and brush your hair.